beautiful bursts of inky black swirls, accenting every powerful punch and kick with glorious visual impact. In 2008, the Inkbleed trailer of Street Fighter IV delivered not only a soul-stirring charge to Street Fighter fans, but a spectacular showcase of the inkwash art style's potential in video games. From Okami to Total War Three Kingdoms and Eastern Exorcist, the presence of inkwash has become increasingly visible in games. To convey the inkwash style's unique look, game developers and artists from many different countries have experimented with a variety of approaches. Dry brushing techniques common to inkwash art have been widely adopted for use in dynamic visual effects. Depth of materials has been replicated through novel approaches in texture stacking, and traditional compositional methods have been reinterpreted for modern environment designs. Among all these experiments, why does Okami, a game released in 2006, remain the benchmark for recreating the inkwash style in video games? To understand how Okami achieved such realistic ink-like textures in a 3D environment, we first need to take a look at the basic components of traditional inkwash paintings. Inkwash paintings, an art style that we are all familiar with, can be defined as a type of art created with a brush, ground ink, and water. Combining these three foundations, it's possible to achieve the most essential element of the style, brushstrokes. An infinite array of emotions has been expressed through the simple means of mixing ink and water in varying consistencies, and the careful control of pressure and tilt of a paintbrush. This is the art of brushwork. The nail and tail is perhaps the most distinctive brushwork technique. Beginning with a sharp, slanting stroke, the brush is turned abruptly inwards and lifted to create a single mark with distinct differences in thickness along its inner and outer edges. This technique is often used when representing fabrics. The nail, the thin, pointed end, represents the apex of a fold, while the curve of the tail indicates the flow of the material. To understand this better, let's take a closer look at how Western painting handles fabrics. People are often astonished at how, in this piece, Da Vinci captures such detail in his lighting and textures. However, the foundation behind these details is the structure. Through induction, we can break down the folds in the fabric into a series of geometric shapes, and the reason these shapes appear the way they do is force. Forces squeeze the fabric into geometric shapes, with different forces revealing more or less of the body beneath, meaning we now need to understand the human body and make use of our anatomical knowledge. Yeah, it can get quickly overwhelming. But these are exactly the topics European artists were researching during the Renaissance, from outline to structure, from shadow to texture. The logic underlying much of today's video game art is also derived from these studies. Inkwash brushwork techniques were developed to meet the same artistic needs, but without the study of anatomy and forces. Instead, the processes were established over thousands of years of refinement. With that being the case, how could developers possibly translate such nuances into geometry-based 3D games? The development of Okami offered a solution to this matter. Okami's development process was not smooth sailing. In 2004, Okami's producers stated in a developer interview that the initial goal of the project was actually to depict natural beauty in a very realistic way. As we can see from this early trailer, both Flora and Amaterasu herself are presented in a realistic art style. However, when one of the artists produced some inkwash sketches, the team loved them so much, they decided to entirely overhaul the game's visual design. Comparing these sketches, we can see on the left that the artifact on Amaterasu's back was designed with geometric shapes in mind, while the shadows are used to create a three-dimensional look. The sketch on the right, however, represents shadows and volume, simply through brushstrokes of varying weights. Though this change in art direction boosted the spiritual feel of the visuals, recreating the ethereal nature of inkwash in 3D was a far greater challenge than in sketches. To tackle this challenge, the team explored many different methods, including shaders very similar to those used in cel-shaded graphics, which are popular today. By calculating the angle between the camera and the planes of the model, an outline was created around the entire object, with sliders to adjust various properties such as thickness, opacity, and color. This might sound simple, but it was only the first step in a long series of experiments. Faithfully recreating the look of ink wash brushstrokes while maintaining structural fidelity required painstaking fine-tuning of each parameter. How did the Okami team manage such a complex workflow? One thing they did was to remove shadows from the game, a risky approach in 3D, as this could confuse spatial relationships. But take a closer look at the rocks. On one side, the outline is always thin, while on the other it is thick, similar to the brush technique we looked at earlier. The effect evokes the feeling of a shadow without actually using any, helping the player to understand the volume of objects. Looking at this Torii, we can see the thickness of the outline gradually increases the closer it gets to the camera. This change in line weight adds depth to the image. With this ravine, each layer of crags fades in with an opacity mask, similar to the splintering technique often used in ink wash landscape paintings. This adds vertical direction to the image, while simultaneously expressing volume and texture. With the presence of enough directional information, a depth of space is achieved in the image. The protagonist, Amaterasu, is a perfect example of these techniques in action. Her ears, one of her signature features, have very distinct outlines which blend together as she moves through certain spaces, creating a shadow-like effect. When Amaterasu is directly in front of the camera, her outline is clearer than the sparrows behind her, creating a hierarchy based on their spatial relationship. This translation of brushwork into a representation of 3D space is just one of the many clever techniques that Clover Studio used to reimagine the ink wash style for video game environments. But there is so much more to this art style than just line weight. Another defining characteristic of ink wash paintings, something that makes it stand out, is its ability to convey motion. Let's look at an example. Consider this image and what could be achieved with ink wash brushwork. The movement of the brush, its speed, pressure, and how wet it was are all perfectly preserved. Where the brush moved slowly, the paper had more time to absorb the ink, resulting in a blurring effect. Where the brush moved quickly, the ink dried before bleeding, for an effect we call dry brushing. These techniques not only depict a subject, they preserve a series of movements of a brush against a canvas. Paintings are, by nature, still, so any technique that conveys a sense of movement is an invaluable asset to an artist. A master of these painting techniques can magically express the flow of time by focusing your attention on the movement of their strokes, almost as though you are painting them yourself subconsciously. Such paintings have enormous impact, for if a technique can convey speed and strength, then it must also be capable of expressing emotion. The dynamic brilliance of the ink wash technique raises the works beyond a simple two-dimensional image. What happens on the canvas is not a picture, but an event. Similar painting ideals can be found in the work of Jackson Pollock, an American abstract expressionist from the 1950s. Okami best captures the fluidity of motion, honed and perfected over thousands of years by Chinese ink wash artists with its celestial brush system. By drawing onto the screen, players can unlock the ability to perform slash attacks, change the weather, or slow down enemies. The game delivers a fantastic drawing experience, such as when inking precise straight lines, players can really feel the momentum of their strokes. Holding the pen to the screen, followed by a quick horizontal pull, produces two separate brush effects at once. This same dynamism is also evident when drawing patterns requiring accuracy, such as circles. Even the effects of a brush overloaded with ink are mimicked perfectly, with the ink levels transitioning into a dry brush effect over time. This effect allows the player to feel what it's like to draw an ink wash painting on their screen. It's through this attention to detail that Clover Studio so powerfully endowed simple geometric shapes with the characteristics of paintings. the motion of the player's hand, combined with the game's mechanics and well-placed visual and audio effects, truly endows the stylus with a sense of power. With all that said, what Okami most impressed me with was its bravery in stepping away from established technical abilities, and the pioneering spirit it brought into bringing something new to the video game industry. Regarding this combination of 2D inkwash paintings with three-dimensional action game mechanics, Okami's producer, Atsushi Inaba, once said, "It was a fun challenge." I don't think that challenge will ever stop. Okami is far from the pinnacle of what can be achieved in video games, and the brushwork presented is but a small slice of what's possible. Color, form, composition, millennia of iteration has left us with an inexhaustible resource that we can use to advance graphical technology. As 3D software develops, its ability to capture the ethereal spirit of inkwash paintings will continue to grow. Perhaps the story of inkwash art in video games has only just begun. Thank you for watching. I'm Game Investigator Jerry. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe. And don't forget to follow GameCores on social media. With many more exciting videos on the way, I look forward to seeing you next time.